Hello friends, this is Worm, and in case you missed it, the Firing Range podcast just dropped a couple nights ago, last night or maybe the night before. I can't remember exactly when it dropped, but it revealed a lot of important stuff that's going to be coming with Destiny 2, and there was one specific thing that I wanted to talk about in regards to, I guess, some complaints I had about Checkmate and all that. And Mercules, one of the Destiny 2 developers, former player of the game, anyway, it doesn't matter who, but he talked about what they're doing to keep hand cannons in check. And honestly, after hearing it, I do feel a lot better about hand cannons being put more in line with where they're supposed to be. So of course, if you played Checkmate over the past couple weeks or couple months, I guess technically, hand cannons were the dominant option by a long shot. I mean, they could their time to kill was unchanged, their ease of getting kills was unchanged, and everything else had a longer TTK. It was a very frustrating situation, especially because some of these 140s could hit at really, really long ranges, which is frustrating. And I'm all for people doing their own thing, but as long as everything is relatively balanced in a sandbox, okay? And they also talked about SMGs as well, and some information on SMGs, which I'll probably share towards the end of the video. But hand cannons were the predominant choice of weapon within the Checkmate game mode. And that had me concerned when I talked about our concerns for Checkmate. This was one of the things I talked about, was that hand cannons were going to be the only viable option if you want to stay competitive, because if somebody else is using a hand cannon and you're not, you're going to struggle to get that TTK, especially with weapons like SMGs or auto rifles or sidearms that require you to hit precision shots that aren't as easy to hit precision shots as something like a hand cannon, you know, like a what's Austrian or something like that. But Mercules basically talked about it, and he said that hand cannons, with the changes that are coming, hand cannons are going to feel a sharp drop off in range. He said basically once you hit a hand cannon's effective max range and you start going on past that, you're not going to be able to get a 3-tap kill anymore. And I think this is a huge deal, because again, one of the things that makes hand cannons nice is they have a certain level of forgiveness where, you know, you can still hit and kill people in 3 shots, certain resiliences past their effective range. And yes, they get less sticky and stuff like that, but that combined with the flinch that hand cannons actually deal onto other players makes it almost unbearable to fight hand cannons, because they're hitting you from such long ranges, really outside of their effective ranges. And Mercules basically talked about how the nerfs to hand cannons body shot damage, as well as the nerf to the buff to Guardian health, and the changes that are coming to range that's going to hit hand cannons and other weapon archetypes, but mainly hand cannons. Bungie has intentionally designed it so that hand cannons can still 3-tap, but they are less forgiving once they're not forgiving at all once you're outside of that effective range. Once you're outside that effective range, you can't 3-tap people anymore, and that's a big thing. But also that paired with the flinch nerf, and this is again something that, you know, Mercules talked about, the flinch nerf that's coming to hand cannons is going to make them feel a lot easier to combat. And it almost has me a little bit concerned as to whether or not hand cannons are still going to be viable, because, you know, say something like a sidearm or an SMG or an auto rifle that flinches a lot compared to a hand cannon. You know, hand cannons, if their flinch is being reduced, especially things like explosive payload and stuff like that, where are hand cannons going to fall in the meta? Because hand cannons are currently now, I would say, are probably in like the top 3, you know, Rose being extremely high performing, great weapon. But with the change coming to flinch, as well as, you know, the range and stuff like that, it makes me wonder if players are going to move away from using hand cannons and start using something like maybe pulse rifles or maybe even auto rifles instead. Because again, hand cannons, they are really strong. They're going to be really strong in their effective range, but once you go outside of that effective range, their TTK is dropping from like a 0.8 something to like a 1.3, sorry, which is kind of a long TTK. I mean, that's a very long TTK. That's something that most other weapons, even with the crit / body shot damage changes, are going to be able to kill you. And like, I'm thinking 300 round per minute sidearm, for example, if you don't hit all crits, your time to kill is still pretty darn fast. And I think that actually 300 round per minute sidearms are still going to be pretty good inside of this game, or inside of you know, the new Crucible sandbox. But yeah, it just kind of made me feel better. I guess I wanted to talk about this because it made me feel better about where hand cannons are going to be. He also talked about deathballing, except he didn't really talk about it. Deathballing is, I think it's still going to be a thing. You know, he basically, what he said is he talked about high skill players are still going to have stuff in their kit to break up death balls. And I think that Checkmate was a pretty good indicator that, yeah, we have that stuff available to us, but at the same time, like, deathballing is still going to happen. And he didn't really say they've done anything to help with that, you know, no like debuffs or anything, which I'm not saying we need debuffs necessarily for being near a teammate, especially if teammates decide to follow you. That'd be frustrating. But anyways, moving on, I wanted to talk about SMGs next, because of course SMGs have been a hot topic for a long time, and they have needed a nerf. And Mercury's brought us some data that I was actually kind of, I mean, I say I'm shocked to hear, but I'm actually not really shocked to hear because it doesn't surprise me. But he basically talked about SMG only accounting for about 14% of crucible weapon kills. I think it was something like that, down from like 33%. And he said that as crazy as SMGs are right now, most of the people that are encountering them and having issues with SMGs are at the higher skill level, and SMGs are almost a skill-based weapon. If you're good with an SMG, they're absolute monsters. But newer players, or players who are not as good at Destiny 2, they don't tend to use SMGs because there's that skill curve. If they can't, you know, within their effective ranges with the recoil and stuff like that. And this was just an interesting bit of information that I hadn't really considered, but I mean, it makes sense. I'm trying to think of, you know, like somebody using an SMG. Like my wife, for example, she plays not as nearly as much as I do, but she plays, and she's not a big SMG user. And I'm like, oh, like SMGs are so good. Like she'll use them every now and then, but she's not a big SMG user. And I asked her to play, well, I watched her with the SMG, and she was definitely like struggling in a lot of engagements because SMGs have a higher have a higher skill curve to them. And it was kind of interesting to hear that, because every single game I'm playing in, I'm getting absolutely goinked by SMGs, and that's why I'm like, oh, like, you know, they should be nerfed, which target lock should definitely be nerfed, and it is getting nerfed, so we're not gonna have to worry about target lock. But I know a lot of people shared that sentiment in a video we did a couple weeks ago with SMGs, is that they were too powerful. And remember, Bungie and Mercury, this whole podcast was a reminder that Bungie doesn't look at just what people are like complaining about. Bungie looks at the data. Bungie looks at the data, and the data says the SMGs are really kind of performing pretty average, with the exception of those target lock SMGs. Now, of course, with the changes that are coming, reducing the body shot damage, you know, and stuff like that, I think we will see a shift, and I think SMGs will still be strong in that close range area, but they're not going to be nearly as strong as they are currently, especially once target lock gets nerfed, because really, I don't see many people using SMGs without target lock. In fact, like as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking of the last like couple Crucible games that I played. Like I think 90% of the SMGs I ran into were Unending Tempest with target lock and dynamic sway reduction, and the ones that weren't Unending Tempest were Adept Immortals. And I actually didn't even look at the rolls on those, but I assume it's probably target lock as well. Honestly, I don't remember the last time I encountered somebody using something that wasn't one of those, or somebody using a 900 round from an SMG for that matter, which I'm a big fan of 900 round from an SMG, so I don't know, we'll have to see what happens here. But yeah, I just want to make this video just kind of, I guess, talking about the state of hand cannons. Like watching this podcast, if I remember, I'll put a link to it in the description, but watching the podcast, like it answered a lot of questions that did have me concerned. It also still left some things open, like we just talked about, the whole deathballing thing. I think deathballing is still going to be a problem. And yes, like I know in the podcast he said, well, deathballing is effective now, but you don't see it very much. But at the same time, when the sandbox changes, like now, we have the ability to win 1v1s easily, you know, because of crit to body ratio, stuff like that. But once you start increasing that, and especially when you have people using things like SMGs or sidearms that can't hit crits as easily as other weapons, you're going to start seeing people start grouping together. And of course, once it starts catching on and people start catching on that, hey, like grouping up is a good idea, then it becomes rampant, because everybody who sees it in the next game is like, ooh, like this is good, I'm gonna start grouping up with my teammates, and then it starts spreading like wildfire. Next thing you know, you have situations of death balling. But yeah, with that being said, I want to hear your thoughts on the podcast. Of course, we didn't talk about everything that they talked about. There was a lot of exciting stuff, especially some stuff coming to 120 scout rifles that I am super excited about. But yeah, I want to hear your thoughts, especially thoughts on, you know, the hand cannon changes, the SMG data that Mercury's revealed and stuff like that. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, of course, drop a like, it helps the channel a lot. Subscribe for more daily Destiny content, and do me a favor, watch the videos you see on the end screen here, because for whatever reason YouTube thinks you'll like them. Guys, I will see you next time. Bye for now.